How's it going, guys? My name is Justin Goltz. I'm here representing Blast Motion. First and foremost, I want to thank ABCA for the opportunity to be a partner of theirs. They've been nothing but great to us. This convention is an unbelievable opportunity to meet a lot of you guys face to face and see kind of everybody in person and give you some insights in terms of how to apply our technology. Second of all, I want to thank our team at Blast for allowing me to speak on our behalf. These guys did an amazing job all year at the Barnstormer clinics across the U.S. with the guys from ABCA, getting face-to-face and taking guys through similar insights here. And then third, wanted to kind of preface this speech with kind of letting you know what I perceive or what I want you guys to have as the biggest takeaways from me standing up here and talking. First and foremost, I want you to walk away with an understanding of how technology can be organized and applied. Walking through the vendor hall this year, in comparison to years past, there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of stuff that can add value to your program. Ultimately, when it comes down to you guys, what's the easiest to implement, what's the easiest to use, what's the most affordable, but also how do I use multiple things in conjunction with each other, so I'll speak to some of that today. Understanding the data collection environments, so in which environments can and should I be using data, and where is it most appropriate, and where will I get the most value? And then third, I'm going to take you through our plane connection rotation metrics, some of our newer metrics that really, we believe, set us apart in the marketplace, but also provide the most value to you guys as coaches. So without further ado, I'll start getting after it. This is by far the most words I'll put on a slide the rest of the presentation, and I promise that. But I do think it's important to kind of share with you guys our philosophy and our understanding of how our technology is developed and implemented. There's a really smart human being by the name of Paul Glazer. He's got a PhD, and he is well known for his influence in human performance. And he's got this grand unifying theory of sports performance to better understand how we should be using technologies, what we should be measuring, and what we should be focused on. We've really used this as the groundwork of what we do and what we develop at Blast. There's a lot of big words in here, a lot of buzzwords, a little bit of eyewash, but I'm going to walk you through exactly what these things mean and why they're important. You guys as coaches or working with your players have the ability to create variability in the organism and the environment and tasks that you work in and that you work with the player. Organism's a fancy word of saying I can use a heavy bat, I can use a light bat, I can use a round handle, I can use an axe handle. I can put constraints on my players with bands, with balls, with multiple tools that are available downstairs and that you can kind of work through and see, right? You guys have the ability to change the organism with the athlete at any given point in time. You also have the ability to change the task. If I want to work breaking balls low and away and have you go opposite field, that's changing the task for a player. It's creating a challenge. It's creating a specific goal in mind for the player. I want you to elevate the ball outside of the infield. That's a specific task. And then the environment is pretty self-explanatory. I can be taking swings in my garage. I can be taking swings in the cage off a tee, in the cage off of a velo machine, in BP, in game. How do all of those things affect my players' coordination and control patterns? So Blast gives you the ability, and we're going to be doing a better job going into this year of tracking the metadata, or is the guy working off of a tee versus a velo machine? How does that change the data? Is this BP or is it in-game? How does that change the data? We give you the ability to collect that metadata on the left. We measure the coordination and control patterns, how the athlete moves with all those variables in the middle. And then we also, with Blast Vision and with other technologies like Rapsodo, HitTrax, TrackMan, you're able to track the performance outcomes, ultimately what matters. Not only launch angle and exit velocity, but hits, batting average, slugging percentage, WOBA, things that actually dictate what happens on the field. So this is a lot of fancy words to just show kind of how this all fits. And regardless of what technology you use and implement in your programs, we use this as a foundation to really figure out and organize how they all fit together and what do I have control over versus what do these technologies need to measure for me. You guys control the organism, the environment, task. We measure the coordination and control patterns and the results in order to give you the best information to move forward with your athlete. We give you a ton of information, but with what I just gave you on the organism, environment, task, coordination and control patterns, and performance outcomes, we're starting to break down the information that we give you in an organized, digestible way. Our swing metrics, on-plane efficiency, rotational acceleration, connection both early and at impact, are coordination and control patterns. It's how the athlete is moving. It's whether they're adapting the barrel with their hands, or they're sequencing properly, or they're getting on the swing plane and staying connected with posture. Those are all the coordination and control patterns. Our impact metrics and what you're able to get with ball flight, with exit velocities and launch angles, are the performance outcomes. I would stand up here and tell you that bat speed's going to be dependent on impact. Bat speed's extremely important. You hear plenty of guys who know what they're talking about dictate the importance of bat speed. I'll take you through some of the parallels from on-field data in terms of why it's important, but why you also have to look at it in tandem with things like plane. But bat speed's important, but I can also tell you, if I take the same exact swing and I make contact out in front of the plate versus getting caught deep in the zone, my bat speed's gonna be significantly different. I've got more time if I catch it out in front of the plate to generate bat speed versus I take that same exact swing and catch it deep in the zone, my bat speed's gonna be lower than it would out in front of the plate. So you can't necessarily knock a player or say that his mechanics weren't proper there because of where he caught the ball deep in the zone. That's why we focus on the swing metrics. And then the impact metrics give you more context, and I'll talk through some of that in a little bit. Last, we implemented Blast Vision, which is a $10 app with your iPhone that gives you launch angles and exit velocities. For people who can afford Rapsodo hit tracks, the colleges that have TrackMan, that's amazing technology. You should use that in game environments. For people who don't have access to that and want to get a pretty good grasp of what those would be, this is an accurate solution to track some of those things, and we are integrating it into our app. Should be out by the end of Q1, so you have pre-impact swing metrics, your impact metrics, and then post-impact metrics thereafter. Pretty much tells you the whole story as it relates to what you can measure with a bat in your hands. When I talked about changing the environment with you guys as a coach, it's 100% going to change the data you collect, and for you to better understand which environments, which tasks, and then which implements, which bats, which constraints give my player the best chance to be successful, or I'm getting the best data from it. This is pretty difficult to read, probably for anybody in the back. We've got on-plane efficiency on the x-axis, rotational acceleration on the y-axis, and we plotted those things against each other. We broke it down. These are 3 players from AA in an organization that we work with, and this is training and game data. So the square is T-work, the circles are flips, the plus signs are velo machines in a cage, and then the stars are in-game data. For my player in the red, I'm able to see that some of his highest plane efficiency came off of the velo machine and in-game. That's probably a good sign that my player is rising to the occasion, taking a tougher environment, and rotating better when he's facing live arms. That's a good sign. Actually, some of his worst swings with rotation and plane are in the square at the bottom left. Some of his low intent, worst swings happened off of a tee. We probably don't want to do a lot of tee work with that guy. It's probably not a need to. Player 2 in the orange has crazy high crazy high plane and decent rotational acceleration, the star there at the top of the graph. And his machine, flips, and tee work are all pretty similar. But he's rising to the occasion. He's sequencing better. He's having better patterns in-game, facing live arms. That's a good sign. And then player 2 is a little bit all over the place, but he did also rise to the occasion in-game. So you'll see guys that their data changes significantly better and guys who their data changes significantly worse in a game. So when we talk about variability, and I've heard a lot of guys speak today about, hey, we need to take baby steps and work off a tee with a guy, you'll understand this when you track the data appropriately. If the guy is hitting well in a game, let's do everything at live game environments and challenge him at that level. If he's falling apart in a game, let's go back to the basics and work off a tee when we need to. Also want to kind of recognize and kind of give credit where credit's due here. I do think and I do know we're one of the very few technologies that can measure data in all of these environments. We've got travel teams that have their kids swing off a tee in their garage, and they're able to collect data there. That same kid can take data to the batting cage that he works with, work off a tee or work off a velo machine with the same sensor. He can also take it BP and in-game. We've got minor leaguers using this on a daily basis in-game. AAU and USSSA allow it in-game. NCAA will come along eventually. But there's ways to, either in a game sim environment in a practice setting, or to duplicate that off of live arms with your players, you can collect in-game data. And we can give you parallels between the cage and between the game, but certain other technologies can't. So getting down to like our playing connection rotation metrics, there's two ways we kind of give you context and information in here. On the left, you see scores based on the 20/80 scale that's been prevalent in baseball for a long time. Your middle or average performers are going to score around 50. If you're average, you're going to see yellow, and you're going to be somewhere in that 45 to 55 range for your score. Your peak performers are going to be in the 70-80 range for these three metrics. We also give you the exact metrics so that you can better understand, like, how am I progressing over time. So on the right, you see a plane score of 56, but you also see an on-plane efficiency of 74%. So for 74% of that guy's swing, he was on the swing plane. I'm going to break down each one of these individual metrics and give you more information there. But the key takeaway here is we give you a score based on your population and skill set, but we also give you the discrete metric that makes up that score and how we calculate it. All right, we've talked a lot about playing. I know that if anybody stopped by our booth, we're going to talk a lot about it, but it's obviously important to us, and I want people to better understand the concept of playing because it's a word that kind of gets used in multiple situations and it has multiple meanings to a lot of people. We measure the swing plane. We've got a sensor on a bat. We have no idea what the incoming pitch is doing or how it's breaking. We don't know what that pitch plane is without context from another technology. But we can tell you what your swing plane is. We've got a video here of Cano to kind of show you how we calculate it. But we take your vertical bat angle at impact, we work backwards from there, and we essentially see how long were you on that swing plane disc. How long were you able to kind of set your posture and rotate explosively on the swing plane? Why does that matter? In theory, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, we want you to be on plane, and we want you to match that swing plane to the pitch plane for the most opportunities for success. These are two examples of guys who are technically on plane, but you also have to use it in context with attack angle. The player on the left has an 85% planar efficiency or on-plane efficiency with a positive attack angle that matches the incoming pitch plane. The average pitch is coming anywhere between -6 and -14 degrees, so I want to match that with my attack angle to maximize the points of contact. The player on the right is also on plane. His on-plane efficiency is still pretty good, 79%, but he's taking a negative attack angle and not maximizing the points of contact there with the baseball. This is kind of combining our 3D swing tracer with that old school Ted Williams infographic. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it's also good to show why on plane is important, but also matching that swing plane to the pitch plane. At the bottom here, we've got two skeleton theoretical swings where the guy is 100% on plane, but the blue one, he's swinging down on the ball. The orange one, he's swinging level. So you can be on plane, but still not make consistent contact if you're not matching that plane to the pitch plane. Why does that matter? Prove to me that plane makes sense or that plane translates to the performance outcomes that you threw up on that first slide. Bat speed is important as it relates to exit velocity. It's physics. If I swing the bat fast, the ball is going to go fast and far when I make solid contact. But how often am I making solid contact should be the end goal, right? So on the left, we've got those same players I showed you a little bit earlier. These are 3 minor leaguers with the organization we work with. We're comparing bat speed on the x-axis, exit velocity on the y-axis. Your peak bat speed will translate to peak exit velocity. So my fastest bat speed will correlate to my fastest exit velocity. If I swing the bat fast, I'm going to hit the ball hard. But how often do I do it? The same guy in the orange who's at that top right-hand corner of the left-hand graph is also at the bottom right-hand corner of plane efficiency and average bat speed on the x-axis, average exit velocity on the y-axis. He had the fastest bat speed of the group, but the lowest planar efficiency and barreled the least amount of balls consistently. His average exit velocity was below 80 miles per hour. That's 8 or 9 miles per hour lower than Major League average. The guy with middle of the road bat speed at the top of the right graph in blue had almost 76% on-plane efficiency, middle of the road bat speed, but his average exit velocity was like 93. That's above Major League average. So he's got decent bat speed, but he stays on plane and makes consistent contact. So I kind of gave you the theory. I showed you how we measure plane. This backs up the fact that it translates to performance outcomes. It's not just a cool metric that we measure and give you. Connection. Connection has a lot of ties to plane and can help you better explain to a guy why he's off plane. The concept of connection, if you watch this Turner clip, we measure your body tilt and we measure your vertical bat angle. And ideally, we're looking for a 90-degree theoretical relationship between the two for all given pitch locations. You can see in this Turner clip, he's using body tilt, whether that be with like hip hinge, lateral tilt, or side bend, to make adjustments for different pitch locations. He's not keeping the same posture and manipulating the barrel with his hands. That's not repeatable. It's not consistent. But we measure connection in two places. This Vlad Jr. clip is probably the best clip we have to best explain it. We measure connection twice. We measure it early when you begin rotation, and then we measure it again at impact. If you are disconnected early, you're going to have to manipulate the barrel to get on plane at impact. If you're both connected early and connected at impact, you will be on plane. All that's happening in between there is passive hands, rotation, and then a late commitment with the last segment of the swing being your hands. Vlad Jr. barrel tips, we don't care. We don't measure early connection until he begins to rotate, and then we measure it again at impact. You can barrel tip. You can be Braun on the left-hand side of the screen with a very vertical bat, as long as when you begin to rotate, you get connected and you get on plane. Braun's teammate Kratz does not do this. He has a very similar stance, but doesn't rotate well and ends up manipulating the barrel with his hands to try and find the swing plane. Doesn't see his success as often. And then Posey on the right-hand side of the screen, in his stance, it would technically be below 90 degrees or a little bit disconnected in his stance, but by the time he begins to rotate, that barrel gets connected and he gets on plane. This is a great way for a coach who has a guy with not the highest plane to explain to a guy why that is. If I can get connected early and connected at impact, I can get you on plane. So using those in context with each other help a lot. We use our 3D swing tracer as a means for coaches and players to really visualize these things and find common ground. Numbers can be hard to translate without some of these visuals. Like my goal walking up here was to give you as many visuals as possible, as little words as possible, and as little numbers as possible, because you kind of have to see it to comprehend it and understand it. We use our 3D swing tracer a lot to explain these concepts. Our second line on our 3D swing tracer shows you the point at which on that disc you got on plane, and then we show you your body tilt and your vertical bat angle and how we got that connection angle at impact. I'm happy to walk through anybody who's skeptical, as you should be, on how a bat sensor can give you body tilt. We had a really smart guy in-house who takes your hand path and essentially finds the center of rotation of the swing. So if you guys can trust me a little bit, we know your hand path, we know your barrel path, and we use modeling steps to find the center of rotation of your swing, and we infer body tilt from that. Now, I can't tell you that that happens from hip hinge or lateral tilt or side bend. I can just give you the angle. But we've had pro organizations that were skeptical, tested it with K-Vest, tested it with motion capture, and it was within 4 to 5 degrees of variance. So it's a very good idea of what the hitter's doing without having to put on multiple sensors, calibrate, stop your routine, and work through that. Now, if you really want to know the exact spine angle, or when we talk about rotational acceleration, you don't want to know the exact sequencing pattern, you should use K-Vest to understand that. Blast can't tell you that. We can tell you whether you're sequencing well or not. We can't tell you which segment's firing where. So we're trying to do as much as we possibly can with one sensor on a bat. We've had some really bright minds and really bright people who've given us the ability to do that. But at the end of the day, these technologies do work hand in hand to dig as deep as you possibly want to. Rotational acceleration. Rotational acceleration is a great one to work in tandem with bat speed. You can have two players, and I'll show you a slide here, two players with very similar bat speeds that build it completely differently. One guy can sequence really well, like Chris Davis, who's an unbelievable example of this. Crazy hip-shoulder separation, hips, then torso, then shoulders, then arms, then hands. Hands are passive early in the swing, not active until that last segment. Again, a tool like K-Vest or 4D can give you a really good indicator of when each segment's firing in sequence or out of sequence and to what magnitude. But I almost guarantee you that this rotational acceleration metric will show you your guys that sequence well versus your guys who are handsy and don't sequence well. If he has low rotational acceleration, he's either a poor block rotator or he's active early with his hands in the swing. If he's got good rotational acceleration, He's sequencing properly. His hands are passive in the swing and not active until the last couple milliseconds. So rotational acceleration is a byproduct of sequencing well. This works really, really well hand in hand with a technology like KVester 4D that can show you that and prove it out. Why is that important? Two guys can have the same exact bat speed or very similar bat speeds, but how quickly and how efficiently they build it can be the separator between success and failure at that level. The guy on the left has a 67 mile per hour bat speed, but 13 Gs of rotational acceleration. Major league average is 17 and a half, almost 18 Gs of rotational acceleration. This guy's sequencing pretty well. The guy on the right is very hand dominant, able to generate a little more bat speed, but is not sequencing properly. If you commit your hands, we have a metric that we talk to a lot with our pro teams called commit time. We can tell you at what point your wrist and forearms unhinge. If you got a guy with low rotational acceleration, I guarantee you he is hand dominant, he's active with his hands early in the swing, and once you've done that, you're going to one spot and one spot only. You don't have the luxury of making a last millisecond adjustment with that last segment being your hands. You've committed to a spot most likely when that pitch is tunneled well, grouped well together with other pitches before it started to break, and you better have guessed well or else you're not making contact. This is a lot of dots and lines. But I'll walk you through it. I think one of the biggest goals that you can walk away with as a coach who has limited time, limited ability, and limited hours to really put together a plan for each individual player based off of this data set or any data set is to use the data to come up with individual training plans in group settings. This graph on the left is actually CAPE data, but it was the best graph I could pull to kind of visualize this. Rotational acceleration is on the x-axis. Planar efficiency is on the y-axis. We plot the CAPE guys against major league averages for those data sets. It's not surprising to see that good collegiate baseball players are below major league average for rotational acceleration and plane. The large majority of guys are in that bottom left-hand quadrant. The guys in the top left-hand quadrant have good rotation, but poor plane. The guys in the bottom right-hand quadrant have good plane, good rotation, poor plane, vice versa. The guys in the top right have above major league average plane and rotation. So how do you take that information and put together individual plans in a group setting? I would work on plane and rotation with the guys at the bottom left. I would work on, what am I looking at? Plane with the guys on the top left, and their rotation's pretty good. The bottom right, I'd work on plane and not rotation, or at least skew the training program heavily to one or the other. And the guys at the top right, I do not want to mess with their mechanics. Like, this could be just as valuable to not mess with a guy's mechanics when you don't need to, as it can be to work on little things throughout the swing. So the guys in the top right, I'm gonna put emphasis around your training on pitch recognition, visual acuity, plate discipline, things of that nature, versus mess around with any mechanical changes. On the right-hand side, I put a distribution chart to kind of show a guy's average versus a guy's ability to potential versus averages, right? So the guy at the bottom left-hand corner in the red is very dispersed. His rotation and his plane are both below average, and very rarely, if ever, does he get to major league average values for those metrics. So if that whole distribution, which it is a combination of in-game, tee work, velo machine, and front toss, which situations are you rising to the occasion and having great metrics, and do you even have the potential to do that? The guy on the bottom left has proven to me that in all settings, he's below average. We have a lot of work to do. I have to put together a plan that's going to work on both plane and both rotation in all settings, because you've never shown me that you can get there, right? The guy in the middle in the orange has a wider distribution. We also see that sometimes he's off the charts. Sometimes he's got 26 Gs of rotational accelerations. That's like 2 standard deviations above major league average. Like, he can do some crazy stuff. But like, where was that? Was that in a game? Was it off of front flips? Was it off a velo machine? And then you catered the training plan to that. But you, as a scout, as an evaluator, creating an assessment, you understand that the guy has potential to get there. We just need to figure out what it was that got you there and focus on that, not the stuff that's in the bottom left-hand corner. And then the guy in the blue is very similar. The majority of his swings are actually above average for rotation and plane. I'm assuming that in all environments, and if we go back to the slide where we broke that down, he's going to be pretty proficient in all three. So to wrap this up, plane, connection, and rotation have become the differentiators for us in the marketplace, and we've not only taken the theory, but applied the data to back those things up. We were fortunate enough to work with some cutting-edge organizations to start these conversations, to iterate and measure them as accurately as possible. And I'd say in the past 18 months to 2 years, we've taken the post-impact data and performance outcomes to back it up that they actually work. It's one thing if you're training to get your guy to have a high plane efficiency, good rotational acceleration, and good connection. If none of that translates to the game, why would you do that? So BLAST is one of the few technologies that can measure these things first and foremost. Secondary, we've taken the time and effort and created the relationships to prove that they translate to success on the field, and that can measure them in all environments to show you where your players are at. Those are probably the biggest takeaways I'd like to leave with you guys today. If I had to really narrow it down and use as little words as possible, plane will create consistent contact. Your bat speed will translate to your peak exit velocity. Your plane will show you how consistently you can barrel balls, and will translate to average exit velocity. Your connection is your ability to adjust to each given pitch location with your bigger muscles and bigger joints that have less degrees of freedom by using body tilt and posture to adjust for different pitch locations versus being handsy and manipulating your barrel. And then rotation will give you a good indication of a guy who can sequence well, and then possibly matching that up with other technologies that can show you guys who don't sequence well exactly which segment needs to fire when and really break that down. But these are why these three things have become so important to us. Please come visit us down at the booth. I know there's a couple hours down there. We'll take you through any details you guys want. Really appreciate you guys being here. The fact that you guys are here to listen to us speak means a lot. Hopefully we provided some value and you walk away with some good stuff today, so appreciate your time.